Hello and welcome to today's episode of Comms Business Live, where we'll be looking at the hidden threats and opportunities presented by the switch off. I'm Charlotte, editor of Comms Business, and I'm delighted to be joined by Julien Parven, channel director at Daisy Communications. Welcome, Julien.
Morning, Charlotte. Morning, everybody.
Thanks for joining us today. So as we move towards the 2025 switch off deadline, there are a range of hidden threats to contend with. And Daisy believes it is vital that industry voices play their part in educating businesses so that they can avoid the potential pitfalls. Despite those challenges, this transition to an all-IP future is a positive story. Julien also has some thoughts on the golden opportunities that go beyond just getting faster internet speeds. So first up, what are those hidden threats that you're seeing as we move towards the switch off?
I think just to take a step back, I think the obvious threats are around the magnitude of the job that faces us all, that faces us all as a channel. And that's just down to the sheer volume of PSTN lines that still are untouched, that still, despite the 4 or 5 years of effort, remain on legacy technology, remain using legacy services. And that's largely down to probably a combination of factors that the customer, the end customer, is still looking at 2025 as being some way in the distance, and there is a high degree of apathy and potentially even disbelief that this legacy telephone network will indeed be switched off. So for those customers that are just operating standard technology, standard telecom services, I guess the basic opportunity or the basic threat is the fact that the longer that they leave it to look at that transition, then the harder that's going to be. Ultimately, the more expensive it's going to be. And it's going to be more challenging in terms of being able to find the necessary resource to affect that switch off or to affect that transition. But underlying below that, there are a number of hidden threats that I think a lot of people are ignorant to, and that pose a real challenge. And those are all around the use of the PSTN network in hidden services. So, for example, fire alarms, lift alarms, even things as basic as door entry systems that do rely on that copper technology behind it to operate. And there's never been really a motivation or a reason for anybody to look to switch that existing technology onto anything new, such as 4G, 5G, IoT, or even moving it to an IP service, simply because the cost of replacement has been too high and the perceived benefit has been too low. But the reality is that as we move towards 2025, these services will have to be transitioned, they will have to move. But the compound effect, if they don't, can be quite significant and in some cases very severe. So imagine a scenario where a lift alarm no longer has connectivity and that lift breaks down. There is no way that anybody in that lift is going to be able to communicate with the lift operator or the managed premise provider to be able to inform them that there is a problem. And that definitely impacts in terms of duty of care. And potentially can have some very severe ramifications. And if we multiply that scenario across a number of different factors, when we look at residential care, when we look at, as I said, fire alarms, when we look at a multitude of scenarios that currently rely on that legacy copper technology, because they're not visible and they're not physically sitting there on somebody's desk by way of a phone, and they're not part of their intrinsic everyday life in terms of being able to access the internet at its most basic form, they largely are going forgotten and unnoticed.
Because they're just buttons that work in those unlikely instances where you need them, and people aren't going to think about them in their day-to-day because how often do you press the lift line?
Correct. And nobody's ever challenged what the underlying technology is behind them and how they work. It's because they are such a common everyday occurrence, people just assume that they'll work.
Definitely. And you're also keen to help businesses to avoid the hidden threat of double migrations. Can you explain a bit more about what you mean by that and why that could be a challenge?
Yeah, so one of the risks that exists within this move to all IP is that providers, channel partners even, will be tempted just to go for the nearest available technology and move customers away from that PSTN base and move them to a Sagia with a hosted IP voice service. But the reality is that Sagia network is not going to be around forever either. And as FTTP becomes more prevalent and it generates greater reach across the economy, across the business community, there will be a need for the customer effectively to make a second jump away from IP onto FTTP. So our message now is to really understand the footprint of the available FTTP technology and to make that switch now, so to make it a much more seamless experience for the customer and not to have to try and perform this whole transitional challenge a second time.
So I guess the thought there is the double migrations are, if that's the only scenario possible, not kind of a default option for people trying to transition customers.
No, not if they have the ability to move them into effectively what is future-proof technology, giving them that full fiber service. And bearing in mind that the opportunity factor that sits alongside that risk is that the technologies and the services that customers have today potentially have been in place for 5, 6, 7 years. And over that period, there's no doubt that those customers' businesses will have evolved, they'll have grown, they'll have changed in shape. So going for almost a like-for-like transition is not really doing a great service to the customer, because we're not providing them with that benefit of looking at how they use the new technology to increase productivity, to generate greater efficiency, ultimately to deliver a competitive edge, all of which is going to have a positive impact on the bottom line.
Absolutely.
I guess a simple sort of real world scenario is if you take your child shopping for trainers on Saturday, you bought them a pair of trainers 2 years ago, you're not going to buy the same pair of trainers 2 years later, simply because the child's grown, they've changed shape, styles of the shoe have changed, and ultimately what they're wanting to use the shoe for has also changed. So looking at the here and now and really evaluating the business customers' needs, performing an audit on their estate, understanding how they use the technology now, but more importantly, how they would like to use the technology in the future, is absolutely paramount to being able to deliver that service and to continue with the whole channel ethos of how do we add value and how do we constantly add value to our customers.
Definitely. And there's also a view around the channel that the switch off itself could be a threat, given the lack of national campaign from either government or from Openreach as kind of the operator of the existing network. How can we as an industry kind of tackle that potential problem of that national campaign not really being there?
You're absolutely right. It isn't. And I think that's a big part of, as I said previously, of why there is apathy and lack of understanding and disbelief as to what's happening, because there is no single common voice that's talking about this as being, a very significant manifesto. Let's bear in mind that this is the most significant change in our industry for, at least the last 35 years. And it's not receiving the coverage and the airtime that it deserves and warrants, and also requires. And, we as a channel have a responsibility and an obligation to look after our customers' businesses and to help them move forward. The easy answer to your question is it's all about education, but education is a slow burn. And if we look at the numbers and break them down, an education piece alone is not going to be enough to get the message out there, given that the industry statistics estimate that currently, as of December 2023, there are still 9.3 million PSTN assets in use in the UK business community. And that 9.3 million is spread across 2.2 million SME customers. So customers of between 1 and 9 employees. And that's a massive reach to be able to get to over what is a finite 24-month period. And you're just breaking down the maths and looking at how many customers need to move each month to be able to avoid this, sort of cattle rush at the end, where everybody's trying just to find a solution, just to keep themselves connected. The challenge is huge. So from my perspective, having a clear single voice that is cascading a message across UK business into the various different vertical sectors who, let's face it, have got different needs and different requirements. But that single common message that this is real, this is happening, you have no choice but to do something. Well, you do have a choice, but the question that you pose to businesses is, if you cannot communicate, can you continue to trade? And I would hazard an opinion that in 99% of occasions that you ask that question, the business is going to say, no, it can't continue to trade. So being able to, not just through education, but through education, through awareness, through specifically talking to the vertical sectors in their own language with information that is specific to them as a sector, it's fundamentally important to be able to, help us as a channel engage with those customers and to effectively and efficiently perform that migration.
Absolutely. And that's exactly what the Fit to Switch campaign from Comms Business is looking to achieve, to kind of be that neutral campaign that is just educating people that this is happening. It's not marketing messages you're receiving from communications providers. It is a real change that your business needs to make in the next 24 months if you want the phone to still ring as we go into 2025 and beyond. And hopefully that speed of those migrations will pick up, because as you pointed to, that over 9 million assets still needing to be upgraded, that's a big job over the next 24 months.
It is. And, the Fit to Switch campaign is important. It creates that lobbying voice, but it does require support. It requires support from government. It requires support from regulator. It requires support from the network operator to get behind it and to create that common message, that theme, that single voice, but being able to adapt that voice into various different tones to suit the audience. But certainly, we have a 2-year window to affect this, and this program needs to gather momentum, and needs to gather momentum quickly. To give us a chance of being able to deliver the new services that customers need, that are fit for purpose, but to do so in a timescale that's efficient and it's non-disruptive.
Definitely. So we've heard about all of these threats that could be waiting along the road to all IP, but there are also plenty of opportunities to be found. So what are your thoughts on how partners can go about uncovering those opportunities?
Without a doubt, there are opportunities. With any change that any industry goes through, it always throws up opportunities. And having been in Channel for so many years, the thing I love about Channel is that it has this constant ability to reinvent itself. And we are absolutely in a period of reinvention now. So as I see the opportunities at an operational level, it's very much a chance to gain a real deep understanding of your customers' infrastructure. Have a look at what they use the technology for today. Look at what they use what they would like to use the technology for tomorrow. But performing that end-to-end audit of the existing asset base and services that are employed, on the basis that, as we all know, moving customers from an old technology to a new technology is by and large going to be more expensive. But by forming this audit service, we're able to identify services that are redundant, services that customers are paying for that they don't even realize exist, and services that aren't fit for purpose and therefore are not cost effectively deployed. And by performing that audit and understanding those cost savings that are there, the customer's got the ability to reinvest that money into really creating themselves a positive future and accelerating themselves on that digital transformation journey. So for me, for channel partners, it's very much about getting under the skin of the customer and getting into the detail, and then being able to look at the new and also the emerging technologies that are around us and how we best fit those technologies for the customer today and beyond.
And this is kind of that idea of the digital gold rush that you're seeing in the marketplace. What do you mean by that, and kind of how can partners make sure they're making the most of this kind of time of opportunity?
Definitely. So yeah, the digital gold rush is a theme that that we came up with really on the basis of not wanting to scaremonger and for this to be seen as a negative, but equally achieving the balance between it not being just a pure capitalization on the fact that this is happening and customers have to change, therefore we've all got the opportunity to make money. And the digital gold rush has got multiple pillars. So it's not just about PSTN switch off, which obviously is a big part of it. But allied to that, you've got the 2G and the 3G network sunsetting. You've got the real, what seems now to be an embedded culture of hybrid working within organizations. And through all of those, you've got this ever-growing need for effective asset management. And by asset management, I'm not necessarily talking just about laptops and devices and phones, but vehicles, people, and possibly most importantly of all, data. And when you combine those four factors together and you start to have those conversations with customers with that detailed understanding of where the customer is now and where the customer would like to get to, then there is an opportunity, but that opportunity has a finite window. So Gold Rush really is about use this as an opportunity for yourselves now as channel partners, unlock that with your customers, still delivering those inherent benefits back to your customer in terms of future-proofing their technology, in terms of improving the efficiency of what they currently have, and effectively giving them an end-to-end infrastructure upgrade. So it's a win-win situation.
So finally, with the switch off kind of looming, what are your thoughts on kind of the best starting point? What should people watching this kind of go away and have at the top of their to-do list?
First and foremost, understand your data. Drill into your customer base, really get that deep understanding of what they currently consume, how long that technology has been in place, and start that engagement with the customer, not on the basis of you're going to have to move, this technology is dying, this is the next appropriate technology, but really being consultative and taking the time to build that understanding. And with that understanding of the customer, we'll build trust. And as we all know, the channel is there as a trusted advisor to these customers, no matter how small they are. And the profile of those customers and the personas that sit within that 1 to 9 base is typically that they don't really care how something works. They just want to know that it does work. But more importantly, they want to know that it gives them that important competitive advantage and that edge moving forward. So for me, absolutely, it's the data. Understand that data, segment it, and then build a plan over the next 2 years for how you're going to get around that data and open those conversations on a positive note with the customer, not focus on the negative threats, be they the explicit threats of just non-connectivity and losing communication altogether, or the hidden threats which have wider ramifications in terms of potentially people's health and duty of care. But the opportunity that this brings, and be positive about this as a movement within the industry.
Absolutely, because as you've pointed to, there's so much to be positive about as we move towards all IP. The infrastructure will be better, and that has wide-reaching benefits for every business across the UK. So lots to be positive about.
Definitely. And I think the biggest challenge that I see for the channel partners, for a lot of channel partners, is being able to free up the time to really get into their existing data and to have those engaged conversations with their customers. And that's why at Daisy Partner Business, one of our key manifestos is about taking care of business. It's about performing the functions that are time consuming, that are costly for partners and for resellers, and to take that operational load away from them, to allow the partner base, to allow the channel to concentrate on those positive conversations with customers.
Absolutely. So that brings us to the end of this episode of Comms Business Live. Julien, thanks so much for sharing your perspective with us.
No problem at all. Thank you very much, Charlotte.
And if anyone watching this wants to follow up with Julien and the Daisy team, there are some links in the video description to connect you with the right people. But otherwise, thanks for joining us and goodbye.